Hey, 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 good morning, everybody, and welcome to Work Should Feel Good, the show where your career growth meets your real life. I'm your host, Diana Alt, and today my guests, Matt Copple and I, are going to talk about what it is really like to make that leap from the corporate tech job into solo consulting. Matt is a friend of mine for a number of years, and he also is a strategic data consultant with people skills, business acumen, and also zero interest in gatekeeping technical knowledge. He's loved playing with technology ever since he learned how to write naughty words on his dad's calculator as a kid. Matt and his wife, Tamara, founded Grand River Analytics to help companies unleash the power of their data and also raise up the next generation of data professionals. Welcome to the show, Matt. How are you doing this morning?
Man, I'm excited. Thank you
I love that.
for having me. This is going to be fun. Looking forward to it.
You and I always have fun when we're talking.
We do.
And what's really interesting is we have talked a lot about your business, and some stuff I think started getting unleashed for you whenever we had the night in the library. Like, I came over to your house. We sat up in this, Matt and Tamara have a beautiful library overlooking their living room with recliners and chilling out. And so we started chatting about this and decided we wanted to do some work together. And we wanted to do this podcast because there's so many people that are just acting like this is easy, like on LinkedIn or all the places. Like, they're basically doing the hustle culture, bro. It's all easy. Just write the perfect content. And it's not easy. So I'm really glad to have you here today. My first question for you, though, is a little bit of a way back thing. So you mentioned in some info you submitted to me, you're a huge history buff, especially the Civil War. Mm-hmm. What got you into that? And tell us also a little bit, is there anything about that that you feel like helps you in your career as a technologist and in your business?
In an ideal utopian world where money didn't matter, and I would be a history professor.
Is Civil War what you would teach?
I would probably teach. I don't think it would matter. Military history is really what I'm in. Yeah. Civil War is kind of my current dig. But it's sort of, in a way, it's sort of a sad story, but it is important. That got me into history, and it was two things. First of all, when I'd go over to my grandma's house in a little bitty town called Dawn, Missouri, literally a one-horse town. She had this beautiful glass-fronted bookcase with a bunch of very old books. And in that set of books were some old encyclopedias. And I would get bored at grandma's house when my friends weren't over, and I needed to do something, and I loved to read. So I pulled out those encyclopedias, and at one point there was an entry on the Roman Empire.
Oh,
thought that was amazing. And then around that same year, I think it was when I was about 12 is when I started doing that. That year, my grandfather passed away, and he was in the hospital at St. Mary's Hospital, which today is the IRS. And of course, the family wanted to say goodbye to grandfather, but they didn't want the kids around. So they sent my aunt with my brothers and I out. And she didn't know what to do with us because, it's emotionally tough, and we're kids. And so we ended up walking up the hill to the Liberty Memorial.
Okay. First time, like 2 weeks ago.
Well, this was my first time when I was 12 years old, 1982.
Okay.
And the museum didn't exist at the time. It was just the two exhibit halls. Mm-hmm. And so she walked us into the exhibit hall that had at the time all of the, one of them has a big mural. The other one had a bunch of uniforms. And I didn't want her to let me, I didn't want to leave.
You just wanted to hang out there. I just went to that museum with my friend Brandon, who is he's a marketing professional, very into like politics from the local all the way up to the national level, has been forever. And we just decided to go there one Sunday recently. And I'm always obsessed with like the stuff the humans used. So I'm like, yeah. Like some statesman did stupid stuff and invaded something. Like, that's cool. Thanks for telling me. Let's look at the uniforms of all the different countries of people represented and fighting in World War I. Like, I could look at that stuff all day. So I hear you. Do you
I have a
feel?
personal connection to it too, in that
Tell me more.
two things. Number one, my grandfather was actually drafted for World War One.
What?
Yeah, my grandfather and his brother were drafted for World War One. My grandfather was much older than my grandmother. But the other thing is that when they built the new memorial, they raised money for it by selling bricks, where you commemorate. And so my mother and my wife purchased a brick for me.
Oh, cool.
I'm a veteran of the United States Army. I was when I was a kid, I was in the Army Reserve, and I served in Desert Storm and Desert Shield. So they actually purchased a brick for me. And so that kind of gives me as part of the fundraiser. And so and also other veterans in my family, including my brother.
You have been like just interested since you were a kid, and alongside building this business and this tech career, you've been deepening your interest in history. That's very cool.
I'm interested in it.
You're interested, you and I are both interested in everything. We could talk all day about throw a topic at us and we will go for an hour. How do you feel like that curiosity about history plays into your career in data?
I think it's my curiosity in general.
Okay.
My mother used to literally say, there's an old saying, curiosity killed the cat.
Yeah.
My mother would say, curiosity killed the mat. I've always been the kid who liked to wander. I was always the kid who liked to explore. I love to read, and I've always been insanely curious. Now,
Nice.
Data in particular kind of appealed to me as well, because data is your history.
Yes.
It's not just your company's history. I mean, all of history itself is written material. That's what history is officially defined as.
Yeah.
So it is data in itself.
It is data in its own way. And what's so interesting to me is we hear as kids, or like really any time, but I definitely remember hearing this in history class as a kid, that if you don't learn your history, you're doomed to repeat it. So we talk about that from the macro scale, but you do the same thing from the micro scale, because we're supposed to use history to inform us on geopolitical events. You know, how do we treat people? How do we interact with other countries and civilizations and cultures? And you do the same thing with your data, only you're trying to figure out what's the product I should build next, or, you know, we're not doing great on customer satisfaction. What can we mine from that and learn to change? So I love that. I love that perspective. So
it doesn't matter what size your business is.
No.
We talk about business intelligence. The intelligence of your business, the brain of your business, is the data that you produce every single day. And so many businesses don't understand how valuable that is. A lot of us, because we have to run a business every day, we know we need to be looking at our financials, and we know we need to be forecasting our financials. And maybe we have a software application that we're building that we use data for, because we want to give our customers the ability to be able to use our software better, or to run their businesses better. But many of us don't think about using our data to run our own businesses together better, right? We don't think about for finding new products, for researching our competitors, for figuring out what we've been doing right and doing wrong. The only data I found that lots of businesses look at is, well, we look at our financials, but that's half of it, and it's not even half.
Yeah, it's important. And I tell you what, it's better than people that don't look at their financials. I have a client who has an accounting background. I met with her yesterday, and we were just brainstorming things for like what she does and doesn't want in her next job. And she has also the ability to do like operations or project management type stuff, like that kind of work too. And she said, like, one of the big reasons she left her last company is because it was a real small business. They didn't really understand the concept of a profit, like the idea of managing financials to become a sustainably profitable business was new to them. And she likes to like unwrangle, detangle stuff. So great. Like I will untangle your books so you can see what it is. But then if they don't actually want to take other actions to be profitable, you can't do anything. But she
You're right.
really gave them the tools to be more organized about that. So you done a lot of things. I didn't realize actually about your time in the military. That's very cool. How did you go from the military into this data career? Like,
Well,
give the Cliff's notes to that.
There wasn't really a from the military to the data career. I
feel like there's a few steps in the middle. So
I was a teenager, and everybody in my school, all the boys in my school, it's just what you did. All of our parents had served, in Vietnam or at some, and so all of us, we just felt like that was what we needed to do. And I grew up in the Cold War and watching Red Dawn and Wolverines, right? So I just had this overwhelming urge to want to go and, fight World War III and die bravely in the Fulda Gap. But
we're not doing that.
No, and I'm glad World War III didn't come out too. It would be a real crimp on the career. World War III.
Everything else.
But it was something that I did because I was patriotic at the time. I wanted to serve. I did not want to serve full time. I had thought about doing that, but my parents were very much against that. And so serving as a weekend warrior, so to speak, it gave me a little bit of extra cash on that I could, spend at college. And it scratched my patriotic itch.
Cool.
And I got to travel, right? I mean, I got to go to Saudi Arabia and Iraq. I wouldn't have done that if I hadn't joined. So it wasn't exactly join the army and see the world, but it did open my eyes. It gave me some discipline. I got to see some things that I never would have seen as a 19-year-old kid. Now as a 20-year-old when I was in the Gulf. Now as a parent, of course, knowing what I put my mother through, probably I wouldn't want my son putting me through that. But I wasn't thinking about that at the time. I was just thinking, I want to serve. I served in a postal unit. I was an Army mailman. That's what I was, with a little unit out of Bethany, Missouri called the 795th Section General Company. Yep, I went to Bethany, Missouri, which is not far from where I grew up. But I would say it's not something that I think about a lot. It was a great experience. I wasn't even a programmer during that time. So
what were you doing for work early on? Because I know you did some other things. Because you and I talked about you were at DST some years ago, like 2006 or something. You started DST and you were in testing then. So what did you do earlier in your career, and when did you pivot into engineering?
I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I was married in 93. I dropped out of college, got married. My wife finished, and I had no clue what I wanted to do. So my very first job, full-time job out of college, being married, was working retail at a Sears store in Columbia, Missouri. And I went from admin job to kind of admin job. I did administrative assistant at a home healthcare agency for a while. I spent a few months sorting books overnight in a warehouse, and then I got a job finally at an insurance company in Columbia, Missouri, as another basically administrative assistant. And I'd always enjoyed technology. I didn't go into technology because I was afraid of math. I didn't like math as a kid. And when I got into college, I found out that I went to the University of Missouri at Columbia, and I found out that to be able to get into their computer science program, you had to take like 3 semesters of calculus and a whole bunch of other math courses.
Yeah.
And I said, man, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
That's too much math. I was scared of it. And so, but by the time I got up to Shelter Insurance, I had started actually doing some programming in something called Lotus Symphony, which was a spreadsheet kind of like Word today.
Yeah.
Or like Office today.
Lotus. I haven't thought about Lotus and
yeah. And so I did some macro programming in it, and I also had done some training for some of my coworkers, because this was the era when everybody and their mother was getting on the internet. And so I was training my older coworkers on how to get on the internet and use AOL.
It's an interesting era, because you're like, what do you mean a spreadsheet? Like, what even is that?
Yeah.
I was in college at the same time taking chemistry labs where we're having to plot stuff on graphs. And I'm like, I don't know how to do that. Can I please draw this? I mean, I drew it in high school. So, yeah, I feel you. But
the catalyst was one of the underwriters in that group said, well, her husband was like, I think the director or a manager over there in the computer science department at that company. And we're now it's 1997 is when the date is now. And all these companies that have mainframes, which Shelter was on a mainframe, there was like maybe 2 or 3 PCs on our floor. It was all mainframe terminals.
Mm-hmm.
And they were trying to get ready for Y2K. And they were literally importing developers. They had rented some dorms from the University of Missouri so that they could put developers up that they were bringing in by the boatload to help fix their systems. And so she told her husband about me programming, and he's like, I heard that you can do computer programming. I said, oh yeah, since I was in high school. I took programming class in high school. I love it. And he says,
you ended up doing Y2K stuff?
Huh?
You ended up doing Y2K stuff?
No, what really happened is I went down there, I took the test. I blew it away. HR did not even, I went to HR, took the test. He walked me down there, blew it away. HR did not even bother to call me back. He comes back up to my desk a few weeks later and says, where's your resume? I thought we were going to be interviewing you. And I said, hey, I took the test. I thought I did well on it, but nobody's called me. And we went there. They required you to have a college degree.
So you didn't have the bachelor's yet.
You didn't even have to program. They taught you to program. They were importing people into this for contracts. They were spending weeks teaching them how to program in COBOL, and they weren't even. But you had to have a college degree. So somebody who already knew, they wouldn't do it. So I got mad. I don't do this very often, but I got mad, and I just decided this is silly. I can do this. I'm going to Kansas City, and I'm going to get my college degree, and I'm going to get into IT.
Cool.
I just made the decision, and my wife and I, literally, we quit. We cashed out our 401ks. Not something I would recommend doing, by the way.
Yeah,
but
do that.
We cashed out our retirement, and we said we're moving to Kansas City, and the rest is history. I was able very shortly after that to get a position. A good friend of mine who'd also moved to Kansas City about the same time from Columbia, he became a help desk manager, and he said, I need a manager. So I need another help desk associate.
Cool.
Come.
So you worked your way up, basically.
I worked my way up. I've done help desk.
Then
I did Linux system administration. I did I did business analysis and product management. And then when I got to DST, I was a business analyst, and there they had another moment where they're needing to recruit developers. And this time I applied, and they let me in.
Nice.
And so 2009, I got into their programming program, and got into their data conversion team.
Cool.
And absolutely loved it. That was when I was just neck deep in data and doing data conversions, and I really learned all the principles of data engineering, which I learned today. I learned on that team. I spent 11 years.
It's unreal how much we try to pretend like all the new tech, all the ways we have to access data, the advent of Agile, that everything is different, and it kind of is, and it kind of isn't. Speaking of the new and different, I'm going to zoom forward.
I'm going to zoom forward
to the world of AI. So one thing I wanted to know is we all kind of were astounded, some good, some bad, in November of 22, whenever ChatGPT went mainstream and we started as lay people hearing about AI, which has been around forever. Like I was in college in 1990, whatever, and they were talking about AI and neural nets then. What is the first change that you saw as a data professional related to AI? So not necessarily us like turning ourselves into Muppets with Dolly, but what was the first kind of things that you saw? Oh, there's a pivot. We're doing AI things now in your career.
Well, it was really before AI is when I saw it, and it's when I went to work for a company here in Kansas City after I left DST as their data engineer.
Okay.
And it was working with their data scientists, and we were implementing machine learning models for things like sentiment analysis. I remember working on a project with some of them where we were basically going through a bunch of emails that customers went back and forth.
You were doing qualitative stuff. That's cool.
And they were doing most of the quantitative stuff.
You in the not me sense of the word you.
Yeah.
But they were looking at that data, those emails, quantitatively and qualitatively.
Exactly, trying to say, hey, are these people wanting to buy, and what can we do to tweak these messages so that people have more buying? And I realized at that point, I said, this is a small company that's doing this.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, this is something that I remember when DST Systems, the company that I worked for there, I remember when they announced very gleefully they were getting into the world of data, and they had a data science team. But once they announced their data science team, nobody ever heard from them again. They did a lot of good. I don't know, but I just didn't hear much from them. And so this was really the first time I had been exposed to data science. And I was like, well, this is going to go everywhere. I mean, every company's going to be doing this. It's inexpensive. We're not paying much to do this. I mean, the data scientists and me, I got good salaries, but it's not that costly. But then we fast forward again a few years to 2022, and the very first time I used GitHub Copilot, which is the tool that I mostly use, I started, as soon as it came out in public preview, I signed up for it and started using it on personal projects. And I was blown away.
So you love it. You're an early adopter. You like your technology in general. One thing I'm curious about is, because what's super wild to me is I look at resumes and LinkedIn profiles and whatnot of job seekers and people trying to get promoted and all that stuff all the time. And even in tech, a very small amount of people are talking about the use of AI tools in making their work more effective. So even a software engineer might be saying, well, I know this, that, and Python, and I can build predictive models and yada, yada, yada. But they forget to say that they use Copilot. They don't think about that. So it's one thing I'm curious, and I just worked on your resume yesterday, so we should probably add some of that. But how many developers have you worked with or talked to that actually don't like it? They're skeptical of Copilot, and kind of what are you seeing in trends related to the actual work of an engineer? Not the products you create, but what it's like to work as an engineer.
So it's, strangely enough, it is, I do know quite a few engineers who dislike it intensely. It gets in the way of their process. They like doing things manually. They like being inside the code, typing the code. They're craftsmen, and I understand that. I love that. I love that too. That I think is something that many software engineers share. You like the thought that this stuff that you're building is yours, and the idea that there's an AI involved in it somewhere, it's not yours anymore, right? And then, of course, there's the very legitimate fears that AI is going to automate much of what we do and therefore make us obsolete. So yes, I see that. But what I also see is a lot of excitement. As people are, especially senior engineers like myself, I hear a lot of excitement. People saying, we spend a lot of time doing the equivalent of drudge work to build programs. Lots of scaffolding, lots of boilerplate code, lots of simple stuff. And I really want to spend my time doing more complicated stuff. I want to be able to build bigger projects, more challenging projects. And it's been very hard to do for several years because we're chronically short of talent.
Yeah.
And even when you have enough talent, writing software is hard, and it's very manual, and it's very error prone. That's why we have all of this
happening. Like, I can fully understand those really killer senior engineers embracing this so that they can work on the cool parts of the problem. What have you seen so far in the companies you've worked with, either full-time or as a consultant, happening to the junior and mid-level developers? How is it impacting that work?
I don't think that we've seen the worst of it yet. It's mostly for impacting juniors and mid-levels. This is mostly something that you're seeing in large enterprises right now. Okay. Things. But it's going to trickle down. We are probably going to be doing more with fewer lower level workers.
Yeah.
I don't like that particularly because you can't become a senior until you start as a junior. Right?
Yeah.
But I still think we're going to have juniors. It's just they're going to be expected to have a higher level of
I think that it really is going to impact the computer science programs.
Oh, it is. We're going to have to change how
they're already behind. But if they churn out graduates that know code, how to write code from like that junior level, but they don't know how to leverage AI, like the expectation is basically going to change. When you and I got out of college, well, you graduated a few years later than I did because you took that break. But when we got out, like it was a big deal to know how to do Word and Excel. Like it was literally in 1997 a big deal if you could do basic stuff in Excel and like moderate stuff in Word. And now you look silly if you even list it on a resume unless you are doing that higher level of programming work. So I think it's going to change what's expected.
Now, I think that because the thing is that we were already short of computer science and programmers. It's always been hard to hire enough programmers, right? So I think we're still going to have that problem. And therefore, while yes, I think jobs are going to change, they're going to be in different places, I still think that computer science is going to be a career for quite some time that a new graduate can go into.
I think it will too, especially when you think about ethical AI, a lot of it has to do with like not letting it become Terminator. Like we want to make sure that the humans still have their thumb on the pulse of the AI. So when news comes out that, was it Google? There was news recently that some big company doing AI has the AI writing the AI that writes the AI or whatever that stuff is. And that's going to happen, but we're always going to want to have humans be able to understand what the AI is doing. So we promised people we were going to talk about the switch. And so let's talk for a little bit about your transition from full-time tech monkey at the corporate level into this solo consulting work. The first thing I wanted to know is like, what led to the decision? What helped you have that gumption to jump off the cliff? Because you'd had the LLC for a while. Like you'd had the container to do work on the side. You and Tamara founded that. But what made you finally go, it's time?
Probably the most boring thing in the world. And that is that my son was getting ready to graduate from college. And once he did that, then I was no longer on the hook for paying his tuition. And suddenly I had much fewer things to have to worry about as far as my financial obligations in the world.
Cool.
So I could afford to be able to do it. And I've wanted to become an entrepreneur, at least to try it, for many, many years. My parents and grandparents were entrepreneurs at various parts of their lives. And I wanted to try it and see what would happen. Would I enjoy it? I didn't know. I thought I might. but I wanted to try.
Yeah, I think that I did that. I had kind of the same story. And I probably I didn't have kids to put through college, but I probably could have afforded to do it sooner. But I had the combination of that. I'd been successfully doing some work on the side. And then I just had that one too many changes that happened at the job. And I was like, okay, we're done. I've been here a long time. We are done now. So you and I kind of came to the same decision for slightly different reasons. But thinking about the finances behind it, like, it is romantic to say, I'm just going to believe in myself and do it. It's not a very good reality. At the same time, there's a lot of advice out there that says you should be replacing like half to 2/3 of your full-time income with your side work before you make the jump. I definitely didn't do that. I didn't have the energy to do that. So how did you think about that part? Because you're like, yeah, I don't have to pay for Noah's school anymore, but also, were you doing anything whenever you left, or did you start from zero revenue?
I had some revenue when I left.
Cool.
I had some.
Yay. What was your first revenue that you were working on right after you went full time?
Well, it was I had a contract with somebody that I'd had a contract with prior to as a side hustle, and I continued with that.
Cool.
And the idea, well, all right. So real history here, folks. I'm not going to give you the one quick way to make a successful business because I broke every rule, and that I didn't think a lot about it. It was a very impulsive decision, and it was something I thought about a lot. I did not have a problem with my full-time job at all. The people there were great. It was fine, but I wanted to do more, and I
scratched the edge.
didn't just want to be at the time. I didn't just want to be a senior engineer. I have had for many years, many opinions on the role of analytics in the workplace and bringing it down from big companies with their big, gigantic data science teams down to the level of small and mid-sized businesses, because we all need it. And I thought, I've got that capability. I can do that communication. I enjoy doing that. And I was like, all I'm doing here at this thing is I'm pushing data back and forth. There's nothing wrong with that. It paid very well. But I just felt like there was more that I could do. Yeah. And so we went on a cruise, and we had some discussions with a common friend of ours while we were with them about the things that I felt like I could do. And they were very encouraging, and Tamara has been encouraging me for years. And so I just said, I didn't have 6 months of income up. We had some savings, but I didn't have 6 months of income. I wasn't replacing my income, to be quite honest with you. And at the time as well, I was wanting to be involved. There was another friend of mine who had a what I thought was a promising startup in the marketing space, and I kind of wanted to be involved with that too. And so I said, you know what, I just continue to do this as a side hustle. Maybe I can work with the marketing startup. I'll see if this thing builds. I'll do it for a few months. If it's not successful, I'll just go back to work. I'm a talented guy. I've got a good history. I think I'll be able to find work. So we said, the worst thing that could possibly happen is I work on this for a few months. I make no money whatsoever. I blow through the savings, and then voila, I've got to send out a resume and find another job. But really, what's the pain there, right? I'm not going to go homeless. I'm not going to stop eating.
I really appreciate that you talk about that, because so many people, whether the issue is that they want to switch jobs, or whether they're burned out and they want to take a break, or whether they want to try doing what you and I did, which is say, forget it to our 6-figure careers and try our own thing. Somehow people go immediately to, I'm not going to be able to eat and live indoors. And I don't mean to dismiss the people that really are that financially close to the edge that they could not do this ripping off the Band-Aid. But really, most of the people that you and I have worked with that might aspire to this don't have to worry about that. Like, they have skills. So you founded the business to be a side thing. Like, you and Tamara had had done that earlier on. When you very, very first started the business, so before you went full time, what were the first one or two things that you did when you founded the business? Like, did you just say, I'm Matt and I can do some stuff for you? Did you develop like a business name and some branding? Did you make a product offering? What did you do first?
Very first thing that we did was we decided, I had a conversation over dinner with a friend of mine who said, I'm looking for somebody to do some work for me. And I was myself thinking I wanted to make a little extra money at the time to help pay for we were saving up for my son's tuition at that point. And I said, I would like to have a little bit of extra income in so that I can pay his college tuition and maybe throw some money in savings, whatever. So I decided to create a business. Now I knew that I didn't want to do a sole proprietorship. And I actually had another entrepreneurial venture back in 2000 at the turn of the century, where my little brother and I had a computer store in a town called Chillicothe, Missouri. And it didn't go for very long because it was his business and I was mostly there supporting him in the business, because obviously I lived in Kansas City, a couple hours away, but I was there I would come down on weekends or whenever I wasn't working and man the store and stuff. And I knew from that process that I needed to, number one, it should not be a sole proprietorship. But number two, I needed to have some legal stuff in place, because obviously I didn't want to put my home, and assets at risk. So the first thing that I did was we came up with a name, which I think we've discussed. I told you earlier today, was kind of I just came up with the name Grand River Analytics based upon where I grew up. And because it was an available domain name, and I couldn't think of anything more creative.
Yeah, you can always change the company name.
I created the LLC, and then the first money I spent after creating the LLC and opening the bank account, the very first money I spent was on branding.
That is such an interesting flex, because most people would, and it's backwards, but I don't criticize it. It just goes to show how different it is that people start. Like, there's not a neat 5-step formula. I do think having an LLC and a bank account is a really good, at least a bank account. People, if you start your thing, you don't know if you really want to invest in it, get a separate bank account and do a credit card that you only put business expenses on. So even if it's not the name of your business, fun fact, when you start your business and you get your first business credit card, it's on your personal credit anyway. So just take one of your cards that's in your own name, set it aside, only put business stuff in it, have a bank account in your name, only do business stuff through that. That is a fundamental great way to start. And then later on, if you decide you want to do the LLC, you can convert things and you kind of are already mentally used to separating the stuff. I didn't do branding for years. I did business on the side. I started coaching on the side in like 2013. 2014 is when I took my first money. And then in 2018, I finally founded the LLC, got the bank account, all that stuff, because I knew I was going to do enough to warrant it. And I wanted to put that structure in place. And then I did branding in 2020. Like, I was doing stuff for like 7 years before I did branding. And you did it first. So
I didn't
did it that way, or are you like, why the hell did I spend money on that at the outset? How do you feel about that decision now?
Oh, I do say, why the hell did I spend money on that at the outset?
Yeah.
But honestly, Diana, I had no idea what I was doing.
You just picked some stuff. Cool.
Yeah. And I was making a good salary already. So I had a little money to spare. Yeah. And I had this thing in my head that maybe if the side hustle went really well, maybe I could. The reason I founded it was to make a little extra money. But the other reason was because in our industry, layoffs are a fact of life.
Yes.
And in my thinking at the time, because we had just gone through the pandemic. So my thinking at the time, and when we went through the pandemic, half of my company, they laid off half of my company.
Yeah.
including some members of my team. And I ended up taking a haircut on pay. So my thought at the time was, if this happens, I don't just want to sit around the house sending out resumes.
Right.
I've got these skills, right?
Yes.
I am the technological equivalent to a handyman. And I'm not a one-trick pony. Not only can I can do data, obviously, is what I love. And I've done a lot of different things in data. But the fact of the matter is, it's just programming. You can program anything.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of different interests in the technological world, and I have a lot of different knowledge. I think it's one of the things that makes me really, it's my selling point, is that I can do a lot more than just build a data warehouse.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, if I get laid off, why don't I'll have this business ready, and I'll just start contracting. I might as well, if you're going to end up waiting for people to call you back on a resume anyway, why not try getting some business in and do it yourself? The worst thing that can possibly happen, again, is it doesn't work. So let's do it.
It's very interesting too, because it's different in different states and countries. But are you incorporated in Missouri? You guys live in Missouri. Yeah, I have my LLC in Kansas. It cost me $150 for the first submission of my LLC. And it costs like $55 to renew it every year. That's it. So when people try to tell you it's expensive to start an LLC, it doesn't have to be. There is the next layer of creating what's known as an operating agreement. Mm-hmm. And depending on your risk tolerance, I'm solo. I actually didn't have an operating agreement for my LLC for 2.5 years. And then I had an attorney that I was working with on some other things, explain some of the benefits. It just makes it even clearer that you have a business. It puts, a bit less risk towards your personal finances. So I went ahead and did that. But you can start an operating agreement off of like LegalZoom or Nolo, fill it out, and then have an attorney review it and maybe only spend like 1 hour of an attorney's time. So that could conceivably be like $500-$600, and you have your whole LLC set up. It does not have to cost $1 zillion. And if you aren't willing to invest, my take is, if you aren't willing to invest $500 at the beginning on an LLC, you're probably doing such a minimal amount of work that just keeping the expenses separate is fine anyway. So it's when you start thinking, oh, I want to do more, or gosh, I made $4,000 last year and I like that, I want some more, that it can make sense if you haven't already decided that you want to do an LLC at the outset. So
it's like, I think it was $50, and you don't have to re-register every year.
Oh yeah, we have to re-register. It's like a report, but still $50. Now, California, different story. That's like $900 or something like that. And there's a lot of rules that even if you're in Missouri, like there are reasons you could have to also incorporate in California if you don't play your cards right. So like, it's not for faint of heart, but when you're doing limited local work, it's pretty easy to do the very first steps. So something that I thought about a lot, I actually started thinking about this when I had my first 1099 consulting job that was paid to me. It was for project management. Did it get AMC? Shout out AMC. But there's like a switch that flips between W-2 and what we do now.
Oh yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about some of the similarities and differences that you see in the W-2 consultant life, the W-2 full-timer life versus that independent consultant life.
There's nobody that's going to call when you don't get up in the morning, right? That's the biggest difference.
Right.
If you're feeling bad, you have to call in sick at work, and if you don't, somebody's probably going to be checking up on you, to see if you're okay, or if you're even going to show up, right? There's nobody to hold account to. There's a fun little meme out on Facebook with otters in it, and it says, Steve wanted to call in, Steve being the otter, he wanted to call in sick, but he knew that the boss knew he was lying, and that's because Steve was the boss, right?
I always say I'm the worst boss I've ever had.
I'm awful, and I often tell people this is the most fun I've ever had, working twice as many hours for half as much money.
Yeah, same.
And so that's the biggest thing is that there is nothing to keep you accountable when you become a business owner. If you are not self-disciplined enough to be able to discipline yourself to get up in the morning and to do the hard things, when you're a W-2 employee, there's always that. I had a boss who used to always say, I'm kind of a craftsman in that I really like to I'm a perfectionist, and I really like to do the right job at the right time, and I like things to be perfect. And he would come to me, and I would be working late one night, and he would just say, Matt, the work will still be there tomorrow morning.
Mm-hmm.
Go home. Right.
Yeah. So you have to have the discipline.
For us, work may not be there tomorrow morning.
Well, what's interesting about it is it depends on how you structure your business. And this is kind of some of the stuff that evolves over time. But I now have in my business, I work really hard to not have too many fixed deliverables. So right now, most of the time, the only thing is if someone hires me to do a workshop, which I try to have prepared workshops so that it's minimal, oh yeah, show up on the day of the workshop and do it, but I've already developed it in the past. That's the ideal. But I try not to have firm dates because I just know that number one, I've had some autoimmune health issues, and I don't want someone depending hardcore on me to deliver exactly on Monday, or they're screwed if it's not till Tuesday, because what if my body fails me? But at the same time, that doesn't work for every type of business. If you're embedded inside a software engineering team working on a product that has to be delivered to the market, that hits different. So what is something else that's different about the W-2 versus the solo consultant vibe?
Well, and I know that all these things probably don't sound positive, and I don't want them to sound negative, but you don't know if the paycheck is coming next week.
You know what I say? The people that are at this was the switch that had to flip for me. Two switches. Number one, it's actually when I realized it was actually insane to get 100% of your income from one source. That was one switch that flipped, and that flipped earlier for me. I was still in corporate America. And I started having this because I worked at a company where 30% of the revenue was derived off one client, and it was a pretty big company. And I saw what negative impacts that had. So it's well, if 30% is bad for this company, how is 100% good for me? And I started doing more things on the side and also building a brand by even if I spoke free, I was speaking at conferences and things.
It took me longer to figure that part out, to be quite honest with you.
I had a lot of exposure to some really excellent entrepreneurs at a phase in my life. That was really important for me, but I had that light switch flip and I was oh, and then I'd also been laid off 3 times in my career. And I thought, it's a fiction that we're going to get paid on every other Friday anyway. We can have that any day. We can be told your services are no longer required. No one is legally required in the US to pay severance. It's a nice thing if they do it. Unemployment is peanuts. The stability, the idea of job security, I had the harsh realization of exactly how much of a fiction that was. And that made the transition easy.
And so that helped. Honestly, that helped pave the way for me.
The knowledge that job security is fiction.
Yeah, because I remember, in 2001, I worked briefly for a startup, and they were a Linux training and system administration consulting company. And I loved that job. It was the favorite job that I had for many, many, many years. But we literally walked into the office one day and everybody saw their paychecks that had been direct deposited the night before being pulled out of their accounts.
Oh my God.
And there was no phone service. And then the office manager comes down, or for the building manager comes down and tells us that we're trespassing because they hadn't paid rent. The company hadn't paid rent for 3 months.
Oh, well, guess you were trespassing.
And then we've lived through the Great Recession. Like if you talk to my wife, or I also have this story of at DST Systems of getting onto their Lotus Note system and just watching people disappear as they went floor to floor.
Wild.
For their very first set of layoffs. And then after that, 2020, where, the company that I was at had to lay off most of its people, and every company did, right? So yeah, I think we've been telling people for a long time, there was this kind of idea that, you get with a job and you're gonna be rewarded by staying there, and you work with the company works with you, but that just isn't the way.
There are no gold watches anymore.
There's no gold watch.
My first layoff was, I was working at a company called CSC Consultant. So it's part of the big computer sciences corporation, CSC, that people know about, but it was this private consulting division, which was different than all the other things. And I happened to be on the bench when they had to make cuts. And I was in the office. I was in the office pretty much every day doing training or trying to help other people with biz dev or whatever. But the first people that get cut in a consulting firm are always the people that are on the bench, or the people, maybe you're on a project, but you haven't been doing very well, you might get cut. So this day they were having all these meetings, and it was funny because one of my kind of acquaintances, like friendly-ish people, but not friend, if that makes sense, was like, well, yeah, it's only the low performers that are getting cut. This is someone I had trained on things. And I was like, I have a meeting with Patty at 12. We all know what that is. So shut it. It can happen to any of us. And a few months later, like, there was a whole nother round of them. And that, some of those same people that were in the office speculating that day were gone. So there's another transition that happens whenever you do this whole jump into solo consulting. Whether you've had the LLC for 10 minutes or 10 years, you move into the full-timer, but oftentimes you still have the side hustle mentality until you start realizing, oh, this is my primary thing. What has the transition been? Like, where are you at on that transition from, this is speculative, this was the side hustle, if I do it for a few months and it doesn't work, like, that's fine, but to now you're treating this as truly your primary? What was that evolution like for you?
Hard, difficult, and not guaranteed that transition would succeed.
Right. I don't mean the financial part, like the getting.
No, I mean from a mental, emotional point of view.
Okay.
I had been a W-2 employee for a very, very long time. And when I decided to go full-time, I still felt last year, I would say that probably until this winter, last winter, I should say, last fall, going through that first summer that I was at, I still had that very experimental attitude of, yeah, it might work, it might not work. I'm just
trying this now.
I'm just trying this out. Yeah. Right. But around last fall is really when it started occurring to me. And part of it was because I had to decide if this was what I wanted to do.
Yes.
I was not fully convinced when I went full-time in March that it was really what I wanted. It was an experiment. I had an opportunity, and I felt like if I did not take that opportunity when it was offered, that whatever happened in the future, no matter how well I did, I would always regret not trying it.
I felt the same way. It's funny because I left full-time in 2019. And the first few months I just decompressed because I was very tired. I had been very burned out. I was replaced with roughly 2 to 2.5 FTEs when I left. I had been begging for help for however long, and it didn't happen. And then they realized naturally after you leave what is needed. But the first few months, I just mostly rested. I think I took an agile coaching course I'd had my eye on, stuff like that. But I mostly just decompressed. And then I really started in earnest in the fall. And at first I was doing technology consulting. I still regarded coaching as a side thing. I never thought that I would make that my full time. I thought I was going to do agile coaching and workshops and product management consulting and like all that. And it was one of the things I learned when I was at AMC is that if you have a contract with somebody, a contract is not like people think, like it is with school teachers where you have to like commit murder to get released from tenure or released from your contract. It's more like, you're here, you're not a full-time employee, you don't get medical insurance, you serve at the pleasure of your executive, and that's it. And when I realized that every day I was not asked to not come back was a positive performance review, that was another mindset shift I had back a couple, like 10 plus years ago. Same kind of thing happened for me. Again, I had to like revisit that in 2019, 2020. And recognize, oh my gosh, yes, as we're considering this project, because there's outs, you write a contract and there's outs for both sides. Oh yeah, we're both still choosing this. We're both still choosing this. And that really helped me too. But I knew pretty quickly that I didn't want to go back. Like I joke, I think a lot of entrepreneurs joke, I'm unemployable. I think, yes, I could be an employee again if I had to, but man, I sure don't want to.
I'm in the same way. Last fall, I started doing some training and just realized how much I enjoyed that. I've always enjoyed mentorship. I've always enjoyed training. I just like being in front of a crowd. I mean, let's face it, I like the sound of my own voice, right?
You're an extroverted data guy.
So. Yeah, I'm a very extroverted data guy, extremely extroverted. I like being around people. And I thought, I really, really like this. I'm not going to say I don't get stressed. There's a lot more stress in this particular position in some ways than I ever had as a W-2. But it's stress that I choose to take on myself. And it's stress with a purpose.
Yeah.
Now, like you, if it comes down to, I've got some financial red lines. So business is not this, you want to say an attitude shift, but this has not really been a shift. This is what I've always felt. Fundamentally, business is about making money. If I didn't have to make money, I would not run Grand River Analytics. I would read history books. I would travel to remote battlefields, and I would try to find a place where I could teach a bunch of really bored college students about history if I didn't want to make money. I would not be.
That's your Powerball career, right?
That's my Powerball career, right? So Grand River Analytics has to meet certain financial markers at certain times. And if it does not, then I will not be doing Grand River Analytics anymore. Obviously, I will be going back to the.
Or it could become, it could go from full-time to side again.
Right. Full-time to side.
Yeah.
The point is that if I cannot, if the business does not make it, then I'm very cold-blooded about it. I will move on and do something else. I'm not going to cry and say, oh, I'm going to do this regardless because, I'm not going to do that. But
I've seen people devote.
I do see people. I know people who should not be in business.
Yeah.
And it's because they're making themselves, and I don't mean unemployable by in that nobody will employ them. They're making themselves unemployable in that they refuse to see the writing on the wall.
Yeah.
Yes. I am always looking for the writing on the wall. I want to continue to do this. I want to do this until I fall dead. Literally. I want to fall dead on a project.
Same. I don't know that I want to fall dead like on a Zoom call coaching someone on like their interview prep for their dream job.
It'd be a little rough for them. But
that would be way rough for them. That would be very traumatizing for all involved that we're still in the mortal coil. But I know that if I shut the business down tomorrow, if I got the Powerball and could shut the business down tomorrow, I'm still going to end up chatting up people about how they can be happier at work. That's just part of, I've been doing that. I did it before I started the company. I'll do it after the company is done. So, before we switch into my little lightning round, real quick, top thing you wish you would have done differently in the shift, and top thing you'd keep the same if you were doing it all over again.
Top thing I wish I had done in the shift was I do wish that I had developed CEO mindset much earlier.
Okay.
Instead of contractor mindset, instead of freelance developer mindset.
Cool.
Going through the process, or have been for, a while now, of thinking about and building Grand River Analytics, building a business.
Mm-hmm.
I did not think about it that way when I got into this, especially when I started as a side hustle and then when I decided to go full time.
Yeah, I didn't either.
There's a lot of other decisions that I probably should have made at the time that would be a lot easier to do now. Now, let me say, I've done pretty well. I feel very good about where my company is at right now. And I feel very good about the things that we offer and about my future as an entrepreneur. But my future would be my past would be a lot easier if I had thought about how to build the business. I was thinking about how to work the business. I was thinking about, how am I going to make sure that I get all my projects done on time? What tools am I going to use? What technologies am I going to specialize in? That was what I was thinking of. I wasn't thinking about, all of those things that you need to think about successorship. I did one thing that I think was really good, and then my wife was a partner in the business. That was a great there. But thinking about stuff like, how do you do lead generation, bring in your clients, how are you going to keep that going, right? How are you going to build the business so that you deliver on a cadence, so that you're delivering smoothly? I had to build those things.
Everybody does. But the thing that I love that you're saying is you have to decide it's important. Otherwise, you're always on the hamster wheel. So
Right.
Is there something other than making Tamara a partner in your business that you would keep the same if you started over?
I would, honestly, I think this is going to sound strange. I think doing that branding early on was one of the best that I ever did.
It was check. It was checked off. You had it done.
Not only that, but it allows me to separate myself from the business.
That's awesome. And
there's two reasons for that. It's not just legal and financial. Obviously, I can sell Grand River Analytics without ever having to sell Matthew Copple, right?
Right.
If that happens. But also, it provides an emotional distance that is critical to running a business. Because if the business is Matthew Copple and things go bad, then the tendency is to blame Matthew Copple. Right. To get the shoulda.
It's like the shame part of it. So maybe Matthew Copple isn't great at running Grand River Analytics, or it runs its course. But if you're saying you think you would have felt more shame if that happened and it was your name, that's a really good observation. I have to say that I wish that I would have been able to land on a brand name. Right now, the podcast's work should feel good, but the business is Diana Alt Coaching and Consulting. And I sometimes wish that I had not done that, but I just couldn't land on something that felt right. So I wasn't going to let that stop me. So there's like a pro and con there. Okay. Lightning round, real quick. What's the worst piece of career advice you've ever received?
Came from my mother, and it was she worked at a bank for 31 years. Same bank. She was not well appreciated there. She worked her way up from teller to being an executive vice president, basically fourth in charge of the bank.
I mean, nice job, Mom.
Great job, Mom. Great job, Mom. She died there. But she gave me this advice that, you find the business, the place, and you give them your loyalty, and they will give you your loyalty back. That was bad advice in the 1990s. It is awful criminal malpractice today. Now, that is from her experience, and that is also because of a very unique period in our economic history when that might actually have been true for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But it is not true.
My parents were able to do that too. I think they're similar in age. My parents both worked. Well, my mom took time off to have kids, but they both worked at the junior college level as professors and like department heads and, various different things that they did. But my dad worked a few years at a couple of other places, and then he worked at the same college for like 25 years or something. And then his retirement job was another 15 years at the college that he and I both graduated from. So, but he used to say I never had to do a job interview because he got jobs on relationships. And I'm for that, but it's not the full story anymore. What is a personal habit that you have which has helped you be successful?
Stubbornness, quite frankly. Stubbornness and curiosity are the two things I get my success to.
That's a characteristic. Are there ways that I'm going to go Tim Ferriss and dig deep on this. So are there ways that shows up day to day? Because that's a mindset and it's characteristics of you. What do you actually do to cultivate deliberately the curiosity and or the stubbornness?
The stubbornness don't really have to cultivate. I got that genetically from my parents.
Yes, mom and dad.
Thank you, mom, dad. They gave me lots of other good things too. The curiosity, the way I spend time every single day learning something. I pick up a book. I go do a tutorial on the net. I pick up a project. I have done this since I was a child.
I've done the same thing.
I love learning new things.
I have put myself to bed reading a book, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, business, whatever, since I figured out how to operate a book. And it's one of my top my number 2 Clifton strengths is actually learner, which just means I love the process of learning. My Powerball job would probably also be to read books, like just hang out and think all day and then help people think about their careers, whether it was for free or paid.
That curiosity has done more for my career than anything else in the world. Because
yes.
I tell people I'm not a hedgehog. I'm not an expert on any particular. I don't think of myself as an expert on any particular thing, but I know a lot about a lot of things, and I understand how those many different things connect together.
That is same.
We get into trouble in businesses because everybody is siloed and specialized. I think about. I know we're going over, but I think this is important. My father had a very complex set of medical conditions when he was in the years before he passed away. He was always seeing specialists, and they were always tripping over each other.
Yeah.
And that is a problem we don't just have in medicine. It is a problem we have everywhere, but it's especially in data, in that you've got silos where I got my data here, or we've got different people doing different things that don't know how the others do it. And somebody makes a change in one part of the business, and it ripples throughout the rest of the business and throws everybody off like a bunch of dominoes. My specialty, because of my curiosity, because I like to take that big 50,000-foot view, has always been that I can help people make those connections. I can warn people, say, dude, you might want to be really careful when you make this change because it's going to affect something way down the road that you don't even think about. Think about your second order, your third order effects. So that's, to me, and that's a lot of where I've gotten my work from.
I appreciate this story. A lot of my career success, which I did 20 years in tech, and I attribute a very high percentage of my my coaching career success to that time back there. But a very high percentage of my career success came from my time at Cerner from 2002 to like late 2006, almost 5 years there. Because Neil Patterson was the founder and CEO, and he got disgusted he got disgusted like, I don't know, a few months or a year before I started there, because nobody could tell him how many clients the company had. They had no idea. There was no unified CRM system and the most basic piece of data they couldn't find. So they ended up deciding to buy Siebel. They did this whole effort. I was involved in that. So I had like 5 years of CRM chops as an analyst and a developer and all the things. It was really great. Last question before we close. What is something you've changed your mind about recently?
Oh, well, that's a weird question because I changed my mind about everything.
It could be big or small. It could be something.
I believe in keeping. I believe in keeping identity small. Is what I like to say. Keep your mind open and keep your identity small. What have I changed my mind on recently? You know what? I've changed my mind a lot on AI, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
I've always been excited about it. I am starting to get a little worried about the way artificial intelligence is being developed. We're going full speed, gallop ahead, without thinking a lot about the human costs.
Yeah.
You and I, being children of the 80s, no doubt remember the problems we had in the 70s and the 80s as factories began automating and people lost their jobs. And we had mass unemployment along with stagflation. And we didn't have a good way of dealing with it. And we, in my opinion, we lost a whole generation of really, could have been really bright people who were making some amazing innovations in our country, in part because we did such a poor job of making sure that as we transitioned through that economy, these people were there, were brought along.
One thing that's,
I feel like we are doing the same thing now. We are not thinking hard at all about what the potential.
There's one thing that's different that I feel makes me feel a little more hopeful, and that is that the understanding of at least basics about AI is democratized across the world. There was the same ability to put your hands on a robot in the 70s as there is to put your hands on an LLM of any type. So
absolutely,
people are going to want to know you, Matt. If I did my job right, if we did our job right here, where can people find you? And how would you like them, if they're interested in just getting to know you or learning about your consulting services, what are the best ways for that to happen?
We have a great website at grandriveranalytics.com. Please also feel free to look me up on LinkedIn. It's at Matthew Copple, MatthewCopple. Got about the easiest way to get a hold of me is definitely through LinkedIn. Give me a connection. Or you can also just send us an email. You can just send me an email at Matthew, Matthew.Copple, Copple, at grandriveranalytics.com. I love people. So even if you don't want to contact me about analytics, I love interesting people. So give me a holler and let's strike up a conversation.
Great.
I'll talk about anything.
Thank you so much for coming, and hopefully we can do this again, like in like 6-12 months, and see a little bit more about
how things are going. Yeah, I would absolutely love to.
It would be really fun. All right. Thanks everyone for hanging out with us, and we'll see you next time.